Hi, this is Ed from Wright. Today we're talking about the Stander X. The Stander X is one of our most versatile stand-on mowers in the heavy-duty commercial category. So we have the Stander B, which also comes in 48 and 52 inch. We've also have the ZK, which is bigger, and its smallest deck is also a 52 inch deck size. But this machine stands in the middle. It's an all-around solid workhorse. It's very productive, very compact. We're going to go over this in great detail. So we're going to look at all the viewpoints here, underneath, how everything works, the features, and how this machine can help you make more money per day. Starting off with the operator view here, so you can see the edge of the deck on that side, the chute over here. The controls are very simple, straightforward layout. So the throttle is right here. The key, we've got the PTO switch. If it's a carbureted engine, we have the choke right here. Very easy to walk up to. All our machines have this quad lever control, so the middle machine controls don't move. The outer ones are the ones that go. It's easier to walk up and go. Also, you don't have to lean forward constantly. Your natural body position is at the middle handle, and you can grip it the entire time. So very straightforward. Our controls are mounted on ball bearings down here, so real easy pivots for the entire life of the machine. Has a good solid feedback in the controls. We have the brake lever here, so the brake has to be on in order to start the engine. When you turn it off, it unlocks the controls as well. You can see this little here, most of our machines have that. So you pull this up, it locks out the controls, so you don't try to drive off with the brake on, or the engine would otherwise start cutting out and that kind of thing. But this just makes it very intuitive to use. Here we have the fuel gauge. This type of fuel gauge here, the needle is actually kind of like a compass needle, has a magnet in it, and it's separate from the gas underneath, and the fuel level device underneath there also has a magnet, and it communicates with this up here. So this type of lens, this white-faced lens here, will never get fogged out, which is great. On this side, we have the deck lift lever. So push a button up and down. Because we use this button, we can apply a ton of spring force to the deck, so it's pretty easy to use. And this machine here, we go 5.5 down to 1.5 inches, and this is what we call a memory pin. So this machine, let's say we set it for 3.5. When you drop this down, you don't have to look at it. You can come halfway up temporarily or all the way up with the button set up here. All right, so now we're going to look behind the pad. This particular pad has actually 2 layers of foam in it, so it's soft to touch, but also has a firmer base behind it. Under here, you can see the electrical system, so the key switch, the hour meter, blade switch, brake switch, and then in the front, it's easier to get to from the front side, but this is the relay and fuse box. You press this little button, it'll slide out. You got it there. Most of the machines have 1 relay and 1 fuse, and then there's a diode in there as well to help protect some of the switches or an EFI engine. Our electrical systems are super simple, and our approach there is just we want less things to go wrong. Electricity could be one of those mystery items. Here we have the throttle control. This particular throttle control, we spec it with a bolt instead of a rivet, and that allows you to tighten the nut here. If the throttle were to begin to slip, you can snug that up and keep the throttle tight forever. The controls operate through these hinges here. So we'll move the lever like this. These control rods, one's pushing, one's pulling. The rod on the front back here is what we call the reference bar, and then this is the kind of more moving side of it. Generally, you would never adjust this one here, and then these ones, this nut here is a left-hand nut, the bottom is a right-hand nut. These can be adjusted to tweak where the middle range will be. We use real large ball ends here, which help the controls be snug their entire life. You don't want stuff getting sloppy or loose after 1,000 hours. Now, when the deck goes up and down, these pieces actually hinge and that allows the pumps to move separately from the frame while remaining a good connection to them with the controls there. Here we have a carbon canister. That would be something generally required by California to control the fuel vapor. It's connected to the vent on the tank. Over here we have the oil tank. This is the cap here. This tank generally is about 2/3 full most of the time. It's where you want it. And the filter here. The filter can drain the entire tank. The easiest way to service this is to use like a Mighty Vac type fluid extractor. But if you don't do that, you can get like a 2-liter bottle and slice the bottom off of it and put it underneath the filter to catch the oil when you pull the filter off of there. Also, this hydro tank is made out of steel. Some tanks are made out of plastic, but these steel ones, they conduct the heat a lot better. We've got all this airflow coming down here from the pumps pulling. It helps keep the hydro system cool, helps the machine last a lot longer. We've got service parts here, so different part numbers and whatnot involved. It just makes it easier. One less thing to do if you need to order a part. Or if you're installing the belt, it shows you the belt path there. That's just another thing you don't have to look up. Okay, the hydros here, these are 12cc pumps. We've got 15 cubic inch wheel motors that are mounted on the outside of the frame here. Again, that's a setup that helps keep everything nice and cool. I'm going to take the shield off. So right here we have these 2 hex nuts. If you loosen those a couple turns, that'll let you move the machine. If you're trying to move without starting the engine or tow it for some reason. Obviously you don't want to tow the machine fast, but this is a hydraulic bypass. It only needs to be backed out. It's a needle valve, so you only need to back it out maybe 1 or 2 turns. When you tighten it, it doesn't need to be super tight, otherwise you could damage the seat of that needle valve. Just slightly snug. That's all that it takes. Alright, so the platform here, we can see we've got the operator presence switch, return springs, and underneath here we have these elastomers. So the Stander X has 4 from the factory. If you can also scoot them forwards or backwards to change the tension. See the other holes there. You could also take off as many as you want. You don't need all 4, where they can be an uneven number. We tend to ship them a little bit stiff because we just don't know, we want to be ready for anything in terms of whoever's buying it and how much force they need. But you can take out 2 or 3 of them, or especially 2 of them, to really soften up the ride if that's what you're looking for. The return springs are separate from these, so when you change these elastomers, it doesn't affect how the switch works. Underneath here, you can see that our belt lines are all straight. The belt going to the deck is flat. Belt for the pumps is all flat, and when the edging goes up and down, you're not straining the belts. That lets us get that complete range from 1.5 inches to 5.5 inches without challenging the belt life at all. This particular clutch, we have the clutch anchor inside the belt path of the pumps. So that means that you don't ever have to take this off with a wire in order to service the belts on the machine. I'm going to do a quick demonstration of how to install a belt on a Stander X Gen2 with the 71460-176 belt. If you don't know the technique, it can be tricky. Up here underneath the pad, you can see the belt diagram. What we want to do is first pass the belt through the idler arm between the idler and the left pulley, loop it around the engine, loop it around the right hand side, and always put the belt around the left pulley last. It has the least wrap, and so it's easier to pop it over. First we pass it over the idler arm. Then we loop it around the engine. Then we go around the right hand pulley. And lastly, We go around the left. In the bottom of the idler arm, there's a square hole which fits a 1/2-inch breaker bar, so you can relieve the tension on that. And there we are. Here we have what we call the anti-tip wheels. This is not something that would be used on a regular basis, but if for any reason the machine were to tip back too much, this here keeps the back of the machine from digging in, and it would rather just kind of roll back a little bit rather than tipping over backwards. Very important safety feature and something I really recommend for anyone who builds a stand-on mower. All right, coming around the side here, you can see we have the 20x10 8 tire. So this machine, it's got a tire that's not necessarily all that big, but we like this tire a lot because the small rim means that we get a ton of squish here, and this tire gets just about as much traction as a 23-inch tire. It helps us keep the machine real compact. You want your center of your axle near the deck because that creates a really tight turning radius when you go around a tree or something with a mulch bed or whatever. So this lets us get that real close arrangement. Fuel tank is about 8 gallons, which generally is more than enough per day. Our Gen 1 Stander X actually used to have 5.5 gallons, and in some cases you wouldn't make it through a full day. So the Gen 2X now has the 8-gallon fuel tank. This machine is a 52-inch deck, so you can see the overhang here. On a 48-inch, the deck is a little bit closer in here, somewhere about right in here on a 48-inch. And on the 61, we actually bump things out a little bit and it gives you a real wide stance. So here you can see the other spring. There's one on each side to help assist the deck. It's in the deck lift system, so it doesn't make the deck necessarily bounce too much. Chains pick up the slack. The adjuster is just a basic nut here. So anytime you change the layout of the deck system, you always want to be sure the front of your blade is a 1/4 inch lower than the back of your blade, and that adjustment's easily made right here. We've got a large section tube. We've got flat free tires on just about everything we build. We've got these little cages around the bearing so that flags and twine and stuff doesn't get wrapped around the bearing. Here we have the service port, the caster housing. We don't put a grease fitting in there because if you pump grease in there all the time, it'll blow the seal out the bottom. And generally, you don't really have to do any maintenance to this unless for any reason you see oil seeping out the bottom. And then what you want to do is pop the cap off with the flathead screwdriver, put a grease fitting in here, pump it up until you have a fresh full load of grease, put the cap back on. So here we have the guard to help protect the muffler, helps when the deck is lower, helps protect stuff so that it doesn't snag across here. This particular machine has the 28 horsepower EFI engine. We also have the 23.5 horsepower Kawasaki carbureted engine. Both great engine options. The 28 horsepower definitely has a ton of power on it. On a 52, I don't think you get to use the whole power just because the deck isn't necessarily big enough to consume all of it. But in a 61, that's where you really feel the difference, where the 28 horsepower makes a noticeable improvement there. The EFI engine, has benefits of cold starting. It manages the temperature of the engine all day long as it's running, so it'll go rich or lean depending on the situation. And you'll save fuel. Nobody will really quote you on how much fuel you can save, and a lot of that is because the actual driving around of the mower only consumes something like 15 or 20% of the total fuel. The other 80% of the fuel that you're burning has to do with how many pounds of grass are coming out of here per acre, per hour, however you want to measure that. So it has a huge amount to do with difference if you're cutting dry summer grass versus spring grass, and you can almost double your fuel consumption in those different situations. So I think that's why a lot of people avoid it. But a lot of engines of this size are burning something around 3/4 of a gallon an hour, or up to a gallon an hour. Typically you'd see that more in like a 850cc engine, something like that. But if we're talking under a gallon an hour here, you might be saving somewhere between 15 to 25% off that in terms of fuel savings with the fuel injected engine. Both the engines have the heavy duty air cleaner. Both the engines have the heavy duty shift starter here. So it's, you might say, like an automotive or tractor type starter instead of the little gear that jumps up on a spiral. The deck, like most of our decks, we have 2 belts on them. You can see we have the main belt coming from the engine here. And then we have a secondary belt going to this side. Now, one of the great advantages to this is that when the engine's turning this direction, this belt here has the most load on it. And there's no idler pulleys on it. It's doing direct work. It goes around to this side, does direct work on that side, and then this idler pulley is really just on the slack side. And the belt doesn't like to get bent backwards, so by only having the idler pulley on the slack side and having a big, huge idler that's about 6 inches in diameter really helps the belt last a long, long time. Also, the bearing that's in this idler it's a double row bearing, so it lasts a lot longer. There's balance, there's force in this belt. It's balanced across both those rows of bearings instead of one, which will have a little bit of wobble to it. So it lasts a real long time. And then the belt here that's on the right hand side of the machine, or the discharge side of the machine, this pulley spinning this direction, this is the side that's under load, this is the return side. So again, this is slack. All our belts are not that tight, and they don't need to be that tight because we've set this up where the belt and the engine are always the same height and they travel together, and tension is what kills a belt. So these last a real long time. Generally, like a lot of mowers, if you pull the clutch on at the wrong engine speed or something, the belt will jump off. But generally, our machines with the with the engine floats with the deck, you can turn the clutch on at any speed you want. Wears the clutch out just a little bit more, but at the end of the day, your productivity is a lot more important. So if you slam the clutch on and off, no problems down under here. Again, this deck is a 52-inch deck. On the 52-inch deck, you have one wheel here. In the 48, there's no wheels on the sides because they're right up against these caster wheels. The 61, you get a wheel over on this side because there's a lot more room in this wheel. It doesn't swing near it. Now, could have we jammed a wheel in here really close to this? Yes, but in some situations it would rub. And when this tire is actually near the deck, that little wheel tends to just be in the way. I mean, the deck is being controlled by a ground tire so near it that you're not going to end up in a scalping situation. You really need a lot of rollers where they're not near the wheel. So these here are further from any wheel. And then also, all right, now coming around this side, we have the flexible chute deflector. This rubber is a particular kind of rubber that has no grain structure to it, so it doesn't want to rip in any one direction. It's very tough and resilient. It's got support and backing on both sides of it. So it can fold over and will always spring up. It's really important that every chute deflector has good support out here, otherwise the discharge will get messed up. So we're folding this in a very particular way to get that lift through here, and then kind of a taper where it can fan out this way. We'll try to maximize safety at the same time as we maximize the cut, and then when we fold this up, it clears where you can mount a grass catcher without having to remove the chute. Coming around the right side, we have the battery box. It's easy to get to without any tools. The knob goes on there and bolts it down. So overall, that's the Stander X. Let's go over some of the main specs. So this machine's around 950 pounds. It goes 9.5 miles an hour. Has 20 by 10 tires in the back with 8-inch rims, so it's high flotation. Has 13-inch flat-free caster tires in the front. I think I said the gas tank's about 8 gallons, and our ground speed is 9.5. All right, now let's go over the specs on the machine. So it comes with either an FX730 engine with 23.5 horsepower, or the Briggs & Stratton engine with the 28 horsepower. There are some Kohlers out there. We've just stopped building the ones with Kohlers, but there's some out there. still in dealers. It has the 12cc pumps with fans, 15-inch cubic wheel motors, so it's a very low pressure system. Runs cool for a long time. Got 8 gallons of fuel. We go 9.5 miles an hour, which is about 5 to 6 acres per hour depending on the deck size. We have the 20x10-8 rear tires, so it's a high flotation tire. Ideally, we ship them at 20 psi, but if you're not aggressively climbing up a curve on it, you can typically bring that pressure down to 12, 13 psi and get a very smooth ride. Just watch your tread wear. If you're wearing your tread in the middle, it means your pressure is a little high. If you're wearing the tread on the shoulders, it means your pressure is a little bit low. On the front, we have the 13-inch flat-free tires, about 950 pounds. We're cutting from 1.5 to 5.5 inches without any deflection of the belts. Deck is 7 gauge with 11 gauge reinforcement on the top of it. And we have the quick adjust deck here, and the deck floating with the engine and hydros floating with it, giving us a very compact machine without any compromise to the belts. Hopefully this is a helpful walk around to you. If you got any questions, put them in the comments. If you're looking for a dealer, go to a website. You can find the dealer map there, enter your address, and look them up. If you'd like to demo a mower, same thing on our website. Reach out to us with your contact information. We'd be glad to follow up with you.